Okay, so we will start with the recitation of the Heart Sutra on page 8. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity, profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this: correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tayata Om Gate Gate Padagate Padasam Gate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the 3 chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Sashadara Samarayate Tayata Gati Gati Padagati Padasam Gati Bodhi Soha. By the teaching of the 3 supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, May inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. May they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. And turning to the mandala offering on page 15. Sashi Poi Shur Chin Me To Ramari Ra Bling Shi Ni Tegen Padi Sange Shindu Mikhe Owaye Doko Namadan Jin Chu Pashu Jetsun Lahama Tam Kinam Kichoko Kala Kien Se Chuzin Trig Jita Sampe No Chishin Malasa Ngechuki Chapa Tu Solidam Guratna Mandala Kam Niriyatayami Sange Churan Sake Chanamla Changchu Badu Dabni Kepsuchi Dagi Chinyengi Pesonampi Trola Panche Sange Drupasho Sange Churan Sake Chanamla Changchu Badu Dabni Kepsuchi Dagi Chinyengi Pesonampi Trola Panche Sange Drupasho Sange Churan Sake Chanamla Changchu Badu Dabni Kapsuchi Dagi Chenyengi Personamki Trola Panchi Sange Drupashu. So setting a most profound Mahayana motivation for engaging in listening, reflecting, contemplating the teachings of the Buddha, particularly this profound one on the 12 links of dependent origination, following in all the ways in which the past great beings have set their motivation with bodhicitta. Okay, so we're continuing on. If people have their diagram, thank you, Susan, for sending that out to folks, and the chart, continuing on going through. So last week we started looking at how these 12 links of dependent arising actually arise and propel our samsaric suffering existences. So with the first link of ignorance, which leads to the compounding factors of karmic actions, volition, so forth, which make an imprint then on the consciousness. And, that is the third link, that substantial continuum of the mind becomes that first moment for the next rebirth, which then is both name and form. So as we got as far as that last week. So here we need to think that all the links mutually reinforce each other, and they're inextricably linked, interconnected. So that ignorance causes the karmic action, but the imprints of karmic action also lead to more ignorance. So you can see how it's sort of self-perpetuating. So this wheel as a conceptual structure like gives us, if you like, a microscope or a magnifying glass to pick out the patterns in our own wheel, our own samsaric experiences. So it can be helpful, actually. People are encouraged to make their own depiction of this wheel, making it particular to yourself. And one of my friends who's indeed a Tanka painter, and when she was creating her own wheel, following this advice, when she was looking at the animal realm, she did a very big horse, like it was leaping out of a picture. And Andy Weber, who was teaching, said, it's a little bit big. And she said, I love horses. Yeah. So that was a particularity. I was I can't remember the name of the book, but there is a wisdom publication that's a more recent one on the Wheel of Life. And it's got black and pink cover, if anyone can think about that. And when it looks at the human realm, it's got things like TVs and computers and things like that, making it a bit contemporary. So we can, it is a way of meditating on it, I guess, so we can look at it like that, but seeing that each and every single action is a single impelling karma. So it's not that two karmic actions combine to create one life. It's the ripening of one of those, though that a second one could be the completing karma that brings about the particularities of that life. Yes, it is complex, right? Well, for what propels existence is a single karmic moment. So no, it's not two. And so, but another one can be contributing or creating the completion karma of that life, the particulars of that life. So we talk about environmental karma, we talk about experiences similar to the cause, we talk about results similar to the cause, those ones. Okay. So we can think that every time we as practitioners remember the vows we've taken, renew our vows, refresh our vows, remember our intention not to harm beings, remember our intention to help others, remember our intention not to follow attachment, having that aspiration repeated again and again and again, the more we do, is a very strong imprint that can propel an entire lifetime. So we create many such imprints every single day, right? Every time we engage in our practices and so forth. And because that intention is to refrain from harm with the body, then it becomes a virtuous action of the body. We can also apply that to the vows that we've taken in relation to speech, in relation to mind, so that becomes like that. And we could conclude that indeed the fact we're all here together is that ripening of that virtuous karma of past lives, because that was the strongest one that ripened at the time of death, our mind of virtue. So it's like, okay, we did it before, we can do it again. I always like to think like that. We can do it again and keep working at it, right? So Arya Sangha explains that each karma we create is like we're shooting arrows up into the air and, shooting these arrows straight up. And at some point in the future, that one or other of those arrows going to connect with the archer. And, there's I think we've got many thousands of countless arrows hovering in the sky, waiting for that opportunity to connect, dive right in. So if we think about it like that we're creating non-virtuous and virtuous karma and non-fluctuating karma all the time, then it can give us a really strong impetus to work on the past karma and limit the creation of further negative imprints, and to cultivate more and more our virtuous karma and strengthen that we've already, cultivated in our mind through our practice, through our motivation for the day, and so forth. So again, the consciousness, number 3, that we're referring to here is not that subtle level of consciousness, lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that, innate purity and so forth, or beginningless mind, just like matter or space. It's actually that particular instance of consciousness that carries that karmic imprint, right? That particular moment of carries the imprints of our karmic actions. So it's very, very precise, in other words. So one example given is, imagine you became furiously angry at someone and you killed them. And after completing that action, anger and aggression still manifest in your system. So that's that moment of consciousness, of that karmic imprint on that consciousness in the 3rd link. Now, few minutes later, few hours later, days later, times later, that energy, that anger, aggression energy, it's going to calm down, but it's not going to disappear. It's going to become dormant in the sort of recesses of your mind, as you engage in other thoughts and activities. We might even forget about it, although I don't know how we could forget about killing someone. But we might forget about the anger or the aggression, even in a lesser intense situation than that. So this idea of those dormant seeds or the dormant mind is, to use another analogy, it's like, those of you who drive a car, you know how to drive a car. You don't have to think about driving a car. It seems to come just automatically, isn't it? Because of the strong imprints on the mind. You don't have to consciously think about it 24 hours a day, or how do I drive a car and so forth. It's there in your skill set, right? As one example. But even if you don't drive for years, and then maybe 10 years later you have to drive, and it's a different style car and so forth, it doesn't take too long to gain it, because you've got that basic familiarity to be able to do it. It doesn't take a lot of conscious effort. And so looking at this not just in one lifetime, but lifetime to lifetime, I was thinking about one example of one of those Australian talent shows, and there's a young boy on a farm who was on one of these, from a farm, who was on one of these talent shows. And growing up on the farm, he had no access to musical instruments, pianos and so forth. But then somehow in life, he encountered a piano. Before very long, he was very, very good at it and was on this talent show. And you've got to say that must be past life imprints that you've certainly forgotten about, because who remembers their past lives, really? But there it is. It met with the conditions, at that point in his life. And there he was, playing beautiful piano after a very short period of time. So having, of course, now I'm a nun, I don't play piano, but having learnt piano from a young age, I know it took a lot of effort on my part. Maybe there were some imprints, at least I was musical, but something. But I think it was more my persistent mother, who was a piano teacher, who got me first onto the piano. And then my persistent other teachers who made me work hard, as we've all done with many things in life, right? So of course, in the Buddhist presentation, we have infinite of these karmic imprints, tendencies, habituations, familiarities on our mind stream, that are dormant, and they remain there non-manifest, and just wait for that suitable trigger to cycle back up to the surface. So in the cultivating emotional balance teacher training, I found this very helpful. It was called an emotional alert database. And this is when, actions done with strong emotion or habituation leave strong imprints. It's like you've got these imprints on your mental continuum or habituations, strong emotions that are latent phase. And then it just has to meet with the correct environmental condition and whammo, it gets triggered. And what that training program was looking, and in accordance with the negative ones, the ones we don't want, is how early can we shine the light of awareness before that trigger and manifests in regrettable emotional episodes, actions, so forth. Before that manifests, how early can we introduce awareness? So this was being presented by Paul Ekman as a psychologist, but we can see how it totally fits in with the Buddha's teachings, How quickly can we shine the light of awareness onto, the mind, or those hidden aspects of the mind? Well, if they're hidden, we can't, but bringing them into more conscious awareness, okay, before they, ripen and impinge on our experience. So we can see how, how also looking from the virtuous side, the importance of setting strong motivation, or it says adjust your motivation, like adjust your mind to one of virtue, and that we have to put effort into this time and time again. So here, in this wheel of life, we looked at in the middle that, the beings going down to the lower realms, they're just sort of free falling down. In other words, it indicates that for non-virtue, we don't have to put a lot of effort in. It's really just arises, and it propels us, if we don't watch our minds, down into more suffering levels of existence. It's like we're so habituated that it just sort of like.
Sorry, can I ask a question on that? Can we create positive imprints for others? It's like, especially animals who don't have the opportunity.
Can we create the positive imprints for others? Not the imprints, but we can create conditions for exposing them, which we do. We do animal blessing practices and so forth, mantras and so forth. There's a whole elaborate story about the old man who met with the Buddha. No, delete. His family treated him badly. They thought he was worthless. They didn't look after him, and was having a hard time. And he looked at the lives of the monks. It was at the time of the Buddha, and thought, well, maybe I should go and do that. And so he went to, which one came first? I think Shariputra. And Shariputra couldn't see any good qualities in him, and turned him away and said, you're an old man, you'll be a junior monk. You'll have to, what junior monks do, new monks do. They do all the sweeping, the cleaning, looking after the gompa and serving the senior monks. And you're too old for that. And you can't study, you can't learn, you're too old for that. And, basically discouraged him, sent him away. And he went away and continued to have this sort of terrible relationship with his family, came back again. And he said, okay, well, is there some other, the Buddha was away, so he wanted to talk to the Buddha. And he said, is there some other senior monk I can talk to? And he went to Madhgalyana. So these two are the two depicted on the tankas, the base, when we have the Buddha image. Where am I looking for a tanka with the two close disciples? Shariputra is mentioned there in the Heart Sutra. And so then so we went to Madhganyana, who said, have you asked anyone else? He said, I asked Shariputra, and he said, well, Shariputra, you know, sort of is higher than me, so I can't make a different decision, go away. Of course, he was persistent. And then the Buddha came back and he went to see the Buddha, who had heard about his story. And he said, the ripening of a karmic seed from a past life, the Buddha through his clairvoyance could see all of our past lives and could see that at one point in a past life, he was a fly on a leaf that was being washed around a stupa. So we talk about the power of the object of the stupa, taking a being around the object of a stupa. And as a result of that, the virtue imprint on the mind of a fly, who probably wouldn't even see a stupa, wouldn't know what a stupa is, but somehow that virtue on the mind stream in a future lifetime ripened for this moment of, hey, meeting the Buddha. I mean, who was there out of us, you know, meeting the Buddha, and then the Buddha granting ordination. And in fact, he did apply effort and was able to study and so forth. So it is like the conditions continue to improve for him. So there are many such stories where animals, like, was it Lama Tsongkhapa or somebody's, you know, the bird heard all the teachings and so forth, and then, you know, ended up human. So we can't see it, it's hidden, but we can do that, you know. People do that. I remember friends of mine in Oregon, in the US, always playing for the goldfish all day, Sangata Sutra, you know, just have it on endless loop for the goldfish. So there's many, many things that we can do. We can't create someone else's karma, but we can provide conditions, and then the conditions have to also come from their side. But we say that there's some familiarity, so that even you can't remember being that fly or that goldfish or whatever, that there's some familiarity when you engage with the Dharma, or the fact that you ran towards the Dharma and so forth. So we don't know what those hidden things are. So yep, go for it with the animals, do whatever you can. You chant mantras and put them in, you know. I remember with fish in a, I was staying somewhere and the fish in the bowl, and just saying the mantras and putting the hands outside and hoping they get the vibrations and blow on the water, and you do whatever you can. Yeah, very good.
I think Venerable Wombo said when she still had chooks, she put a Buddha statue in the hen house.
Yeah, Buddha statues in the hen house, yeah. Elevated respectfully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many, many things that we can do.
Especially if the bowl is here and they're pecking. So they're prostrating to the
Yes, you have the Buddha there, you have the, yeah, have them pecking below there. Yeah, why not? Go for it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then name and form, which we ended up with last week, which we said is the 5 aggregates, or the potential for those within the womb, right? And so that lasts until the fetus begins to develop sense organs. So that brings us to the 5th link. It says 6 sense spheres, which is represented in the diagram by an empty house. So the empty house, usually it has a door and 4 or 5 windows. This is all representing the 6 senses. But they're not, it's not, yes, the functioning organs haven't developed. So it's within the womb, the potentialities for the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mental sense powers. And so, which then open the way for the 6 sense consciousnesses. And it's only you know, and then the organs develop. So we call these the 12 sources of those, all of those consciousnesses coming together with the sense spheres and the organs. So, so these they're not all fully developed at the same time, and then the sense organs come along and develop. But until those sense organs and sense consciousnesses engage with an object, right, they can't function. So they don't function until they engage their respective object. Eye sees form, and ear hears sounds, and so forth and so forth. And that is the beginning then of the sixth link, right, which is contact. And the contact is represented here by a man and a woman embracing, or this one here lying together. It's not having intercourse, it's not sex, it's merely making contact. It's representing making contact. So, and this refers to the contact of the sense organ with its particular object, and then discriminating that object subsequently as either something attractive, which is desirous, or unpleasant, unattractive, or neutral. It's neither here nor there. So those objects are always present, but it's when the sense organ actually engages, you know, and then the subtle sense consciousness that enables you to see, hear, develops. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness. So we're talking about here the development in the womb. And it can be said that those, you know, it's not that at a certain point in the womb, there is experience, you know, there is a sense of making contact with maybe the warmth of the fluid in the uterus or the movement of the mother and so forth. Anybody who's had a child can know that, you know, there is movement and response in the womb. So the emphasis here is the development of the conditions for creating karma once again. Okay. And so we can see that, you know, a baby in the womb is not that blank state. It is already a process that is set in by the development of the fetus, but also by what comes along with that, link one, all our mistaken views, habitual craving, and so forth. You know, which we've accumulated from beginningless lives. You know, when a baby's born and we say, oh, there's a wise old soul, or they've been here before, or so forth. It's sort of, yeah. So we've got those karmic habituations. And when that actual contact is made, what happens, so for example, in the womb, the baby could already experience feelings of pleasure and pain, but not yet being able to distinguish external objects that cause pleasure and pain, because it, like, yeah. So that process, when that process is reawakened through contact with those objects, it arouses feelings. So it says, from these discriminations at the time of contact, the sixth link arise feelings of pleasure, pain, or neutrality as the individual internal sense spheres develop. And then feeling ranges from the moments of that pleasurable, painful, and neutral feeling in the womb to the development of, well, it says here, the capacity for orgasm, but also periods of feeling throughout lifetime. So not just orgasm, all feelings throughout lifetime. So it says that, so it lasts until our death, unless your mental faculties deteriorate such that you can't distinguish pain, pleasure, or so forth. Certainly when we look at this at the time of death, looking at the death process, this comes along in the second stage of the death process. You know, when we lose the capacity for hearing, the water element dissolves, everything starts to dry up, but we lose the ability to distinguish feelings of pleasure, pain, and so forth. So it comes along fairly early on in that sort of dissolution process. So with feeling, we react to feeling with different types of craving, and again, conditioned by our root ignorance, and again, continue to create negative karma. So when we recite the Heart Sutra, or when we look at the aggregates, it says of form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So the form is physical form. And then feeling in that aspect is that sensation of pleasure, pain, so forth. Discrimination or perception. And so these are singled out from all the other mental factors which come along in the compositional factors. And then we have consciousness, or the main sense consciousnesses and mental consciousness. So why are feeling and discrimination so singled out? And generally it's said that because our attachment to pleasurable feelings and aversion to unpleasant ones is the motivating factor in all our karmic actions. So it's like pretty significant in propelling existence. And the discrimination one, and does include all our beliefs about the nature of reality based on this ignorance, you know, which will determine what actions we experience that either maximize pain or pleasure or so forth. So even though feeling can be seen as both sensual or based on the senses and mental sensations, indeed when we do the meditations on the 4 close applications of mindfulness, the one on the mindfulness of feelings, we're looking at sensations within the body, familiarizing with that. But really it's the subtle mental sensations which are beyond our awareness, which are the sort of primary motivating factor in our actions. So really that's what's being referred to here. So out of sensory and mental, if we think about it, you know, we're very social beings as human beings. Most of our activities are preoccupied with how others perceive us, you know, how we dress, the haircuts we have, and so forth, or the personas we perhaps project, depending on the company we're in. But also think about it, you know, spending time. We spend a lot of time with others. You know, we are very social beings, as people discovered in lockdown and all the difficulties with that social interaction. And we found a way through it, didn't we? Zoom and online and FaceTiming, whatever, not wanting to promote any particular platform, but yeah. Or places that we enjoy, whether it's going to the beach or to the footy or to the shopping centre or going on a picnic or whatever, you know, going to a park. Again, you know, the wish to travel, you know, that nothing like lockdown to make you want to travel, or, you know, flights overseas not happening to make you want to travel. But now that's all opening up and people are traveling big time, right? Yeah. And coming together in crowds, maybe not in WA so much, though we have just eased some of our lockdown arrangements, haven't we? We can have a few more people. Yeah. Anyway, slowly. So, you know, when we consider what's worth pursuing, and that's constructed by these subtle concepts more so than by any sort of biological imperative. So then the feelings associated with that are also very subtle ones. Even though here it's represented in a very, you could say, gross, manifest way, you know, being pierced, a person being pierced through the eye with an arrow. It seems pretty intense, but actually it's quite subtle, and we're not normally aware of our motivations for actions, right? So a way to become more aware of that is to slow down and become more aware of the link between feeling and then the next one that comes along, the craving, you know, to develop enough concentration to notice these subtle levels and develop those meditation practices and mindfulness of feelings. And when you do those meditation practices, first of all, you know, it's sort of, we're very aware that what is happening all day, every day, suddenly it becomes to our awareness that even at the level of the sense, you know, physical senses, you know, the mind is going, oh, pleasant, unpleasant, or indifferent because it's neutral. I'm not even aware of those sensations. And so it's constantly, if we slow down and spend time in meditation, it sort of feels like it's a whole clogged up system. And everything's sort of conglomerated together. Maybe we can't even distinguish the different feelings, that they're so quick on top of each other or meshed together. But with slowing down, with patience, with repeated meditation, we learn to identify different individual sensations. And we might even be able to track that back to the past, you know. Oh, where did that come from, you know? Something unresolved in my experience or the subliminal levels of the mind, you know. If we're able to do that, we start to appreciate more and more the power of karmic imprints and how they can just remain there latent, because, you know, being latent means they're pretty hidden. But the more we can get in tune with that, we can see how past moments, past feelings and so forth influence our action. And then we can do something with it, you know, to weaken those that we don't want to have. Yeah, but if we don't do that, they get stronger and stronger until they're strong enough to propel existence after existence in samsara. Of course, we know you know, highly advanced practitioners with you know, incredible levels of concentration are able to trace that, you know, cause and effect over multiple lifetimes, recall past lives, just like the Buddha did on the night of his enlightenment, recall those past lives, understood all about karma. And so, as the Buddha said, only a Buddha can understand that. So it's going to take a lot to reach that point. But until we're able to do that, or at least in the meantime, you know, we can contemplate deeply over and over again this teaching on the 12 links, how they connect with each other, and at least have an intellectual understanding of the process, and, you know, more and more connect it to our own experience, you know, make the links and develop our awareness so that we familiarize more and more how this, at least how this is all playing out. And that itself leaves a very strong imprint on our mind, you know, so that we will eventually gain those direct experiences that lead to liberation from this cycle of existence. And even we can't develop that sort of insight. You might be like, yeah, is that going to happen in this lifetime? Don't doubt yourself. But even if we can't do that right away, it's enough to gain the understanding that make us more mindful of our motivation, you know, and to have that gap before we respond in a situation. We're just like, what's my motivation here? What's my, is it pure? Is it necessary? Is it beneficial? All of these things. Is it meaningful? And also attending to how our habitual unskillful responses, how they come along, and how that leads from feeling to craving. Of course, at the same time, if we also rejoice in the positive results we create by taking vows, by choosing to abstain from habitual impulses, they're very powerful. And by rejoicing in it, makes it more and more powerful, as all the time in our practice where it says pause and rejoice in your own virtues, all your own merits, past, present, and future, the ones to come, up to Buddhahood. Those of all other ordinary beings is maximizing it. And then those of all the bodhisattvas, those of all the Buddhas. And it said that, and the Buddha is inseparable from our gurus who've taken this form for our benefit. And we said that if you rejoice in that of the Buddhas, you get 1/10 of their limitless virtues, which is 1/10 of limitless. So I always think, go for that one. So just, it's the easiest way of creating more and more power to create positive results in future lifetimes. Right? Okay, so then the next link that we're looking at from feeling, where, as we said, craving, which is represented here in the diagram by someone drinking alcohol. So craving, desire, attachment. And this is the one that really propels existence. Our desire, to hold on to pleasure, to separate ourselves from pain, and our desire for neutral feelings to not diminish. So we'll come to the neutral ones. So, as it says, although we feel attachment even in the womb, the emphasis of the 12 links is on specific acts of attachment that nourish karmic potencies that produce another lifetime, a next lifetime. And if you think about what happens with, say, this example is quite useful of a person drinking alcohol, because it's, again, this attachment based on our ignorant mind that has confused about reality. If you think what happens if you drink alcohol, it completely confuses the mind. It completely blurs the mind. You don't see things clearly. You lose the power of the mind, and you engage in some maybe regrettable speech, maybe some regrettable action, and so forth. So even this, it doesn't have to be, getting drunk, but that mind of attachment, that, like when I, had a bit of time on my hands one time after a work meeting where I'd had one glass of wine and then sat to meditate. I thought, I've got a bit of time. I'll just do a bit of meditation before whatever I had to do next. And it was like, whoa, I think I was a cheap drunk, right? One glass of wine at lunch really has an impact on the mind. Anyway, those days are over, thankfully. So it really, and of course, it can lead to more and more craving and grasping at whatever object. So even though we say that root ignorance is the root of psychoexistence, it's the first link, craving is the one that is the direct cause that fuels the process of existence. Of course, nothing wrong with wanting to be happy and avoid suffering. But 24 hours a day, if we watch our mind, even in dreams, we have this continuous stream of thoughts and feelings bubbling up to our consciousness. And usually, again, like with feeling, it's too subtle for us to recognize, but, the imprints of past thoughts arising dormant on the mind that we looked at in the process of the second link of karmic formation and third link of consciousness. And because that we don't recognize it until, as manifestations of our own mind, when those circumstances occur, we think that it's only, triggered by things external to us rather than our own deeper inner processes. So we're constantly engaging in these habitual ways of thinking, projecting qualities onto external objects, labeling them as causes of happiness or as pleasant or as causes of suffering or as unpleasant. And we know throughout our experience that it is an inner process because not everybody relates to the same object as something pleasant or the same object as something unpleasant. The person you detest, somebody else loves them, or, you love chocolate, someone else doesn't, or whatever, let alone in different realms of existence, a different experience, like the hungry ghosts who we might say, water, I don't necessarily love or hate water. It has a function, so it's quite neutral. In the God realms, they experience as ambrosial nectar, right? In the hungry ghost realm, they experience as pus. There's the constant craving, definitely the constant craving, but it's not satisfying. So you can see how it's a projection of the mind that seems to, that is the creator of our sense of pleasure or pain or so forth. But it's not the wanting pleasure and wanting to avoid pain that's the problem, because, that's sensible, isn't it? Totally sensible. But it's these thoughts, the wrong thoughts, that completely exaggerate the qualities of objects, getting it wrong, which is manipulated by our mind of ignorance. And so through desire, through craving, our mind takes us for a ride again and again and again and again and again. So we could say that feeling is a more subtle form, in that it's like a subtle itch that we can't even discern, whereas the constant craving, the craving mind, is the one that's constantly propelled. I've got to go there, I've got to do this, I've got to have that, and so forth. So on this, Lama Zopa Rinpoche advises, to observe this mind by going to the shopping centre, not to buy something, but just to observe the mind. Where does the mind go to? What craving that the mind goes to, just to observe the craving mind. Of course, if you do go ahead and buy that thing, then it's the grasping mind, the next one, because it's now mine. So it's grasping at, this is mine now, and then I've got to protect that. Even you haven't bought it yet, the moment before you buy, or when you've decided you're going to buy, it's already mine, isn't it? Even you haven't done the transaction. Now it's mine. I've got all plans for whatever it is that you want. So there's the three types of craving, so first of all, craving for pleasure, which is what we've been talking about here, either wanting to continually have pleasant sensations or prolong that sensation. And this is the one that advertising harnesses and elaborates on the qualities that we've already exaggerated, and they create a few more on top that really have nothing to do with the object. I think sometimes advertising is so challenging, you don't even know what they're advertising for, because they're talking about all these experiences, and then you've got to be, I wonder what that's actually advertising. And they're very clever at it, right? Yeah, very, very clever at it. So they hook us in on that one. So, yeah. So, you know, we might recall, oh, a particular flavor of ice cream, and where did I get that ice cream? And I've got to get that ice cream again. I've got to go to that place. I know in Sydney, there was a particular place we would go for ice cream. It's probably still there. These days I don't eat ice cream, but it's probably still there. Anyway, you know, it's that special experience. I'm sure we've got places like that, that special experience. The next, so we know this one, and that also includes the one of not wanting to experience the opposite, you know, of course, to be separated from that which we don't like. The next one, it's called craving for annihilation, but it doesn't mean I don't want to exist. It doesn't mean that. It means that aversion to things that we don't want, those suffering sensations, you know, wanting to avoid it, wanting to destroy them. You know. And yes, so, you know, we recall a particular situation or a bad experience and like, I don't want to go there, I'm not going there, you know, and so forth. Or we distract ourselves away to something enjoyable. That's not a nice thought to have, so I'll distract myself. And the third one is craving for existence. And this is the one that propels us along in the links here of the wheel. However, the craving for existence, this is said to be a response to those neutral sensations. So the peaceful sensations, which is experienced in deep meditative concentration. And you're wanting to stay with that feeling forever, you know. So we might have had it momentarily, but as one progresses up through the form and formless realm, we can see that that becomes a state of meditative absorption. The first Dalai Lama explicitly explains that this is called craving for existence, particularly into relation to those meditative absorption states, in order to just knock on the head the idea that those states of meditative absorption are true liberation, because it all feels so blissful and good. This must be it, you know, abiding in peace. That those beings are still within samsara, and at some point will come crashing down again because, you know, abiding, say, in the God realms and not having these clunky bodies and having pleasant experiences until there's that prediction a week before, it is said, their very long life is coming to an end, and they see their future rebirths in the suffering existences, and then all hell breaks loose already in their minds. So it's like you've frittered away all those good qualities that you've cultivated over lifetimes, kaboom, you know. So it's because there's still that innate self-grasping, haven't freed themselves of that. But we can also say each and every one of us has a body because we've craved to have one. We've craved to exist, you know. When I was a ratty teenager, as opposed to a ratty whatever I am now, but when I was a ratty teenager and I said to my mother, I didn't ask to be born. And my mother, being a good Catholic mum, said, I didn't ask to have you. And what I discovered when I encountered Buddhism, she was right and I was wrong, because I did crave to exist, you know. She was probably right. She was just having a good time. She wasn't like, I think I'm making a baby now, when she already had a few. But I can't blame my mum anymore for anything. That's what the Buddha said. You can't blame your mum. You can't blame anyone, right? So this craving, all of these cravings just, you know, strengthen, reinforce the feeling, that inner feeling, and strengthen the force of past imprints that lead us again and again to engage in more strong karmic actions, thicken our ignorance, which is quite interesting if you think about our ignorance, you know, thickening, obscuring the mind. One of the mind and life conferences between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and you know, the mind scientists, and it was on addiction. I don't know if anyone saw this, it was some years ago. And what they were showing, that what happens in the brain of an addict, because addiction is really like craving gone berserk, isn't it? It's totally, you become totally powerless. That these telomeres, I'm not a brain scientist, neuroscientist, but functioning in the brain, in the mind of an addict, thicken such that even you go beyond the pleasure response, it's now a pain response, but you're now hooked in the addiction. It's quite fascinating, right? To see that through this. Anyway, they're showing it because they can measure the brain. But it can make sense that, you know, if we think about it in terms of that compulsion where you can no longer stop, you know, and so you're hooked into this repeated cycle. It's strengthened and strengthened and strengthened. We say, okay, I may not be an addict, but look at my habituation, my craving habituation that just got stronger and stronger since beginning of this lifetime. So how hard that is for us to, it's manifest, I can see it, but it's very hard to cut. So Lama Tsongkhapa says in the great treatise on the path that without the root ignorance, there'd be no craving response. It's a bit of a hint. And even feeling does arise, we're not propelled to the next link of craving. So we have the feeling, we have the sensations. So you can see someone like His Holiness Dalai Lama gets colds, gets cancers, gets so forth, or Lama Zopa Rinpoche manifesting stroke. One time at a Kopan monastery, Venerable Roger was explaining to Rinpoche that Venerable Karen, Annie Karen, who wrote put together the Lam Rim outlines, which is the November course, if it is happening again. Is it happening again? The November course has not been happening the last few years. The sort of text that's used for that on the Lam Rim. Anyway, so this time she was in a lot of pain because she had a frozen shoulder and was distressed because she couldn't prostrate, she couldn't do these things. And Venerable Roger is explaining to Rinpoche what a frozen shoulder was. And then Rinpoche says, oh, I've got that. Prostrating away, doing all these things. So it wasn't as intense, like the experience. Yeah, the feelings there. Yeah, oh, Venerable Roger goes, oh, I didn't know that. So he'd gone beyond that. Yeah, he'd gone beyond this stage. So again, when feeling arises, when we're able to observe that, our best response is just to observe the nature of our mind, how it responds to those feelings. Another example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I think was criticized at one point for wearing a Rolex watch. He had a Rolex watch. Somebody gave him a Rolex watch and he was wearing the Rolex watch. But then you saw him also with a Mickey Mouse watch that someone gave him that. He didn't care whether it was a Rolex or a Mickey Mouse, you know, there wasn't that craving at, oh, excuse me, have you seen my Rolex watch? But there is a particular watch that only 2 people in the world can take apart and put back together again. One's a British watchmaker. And so if you have one of those, I don't know what it is, some very high, expensive watch, so I wouldn't have a clue what it is. And the other one's the Dalai Lama, and I know who I'd take mine to if I had one, because I think it'd be cheaper. So you can say he's very fascinated with the workings of watches, but not particular brands or whatever. Just, you know, doesn't care. Another example, Venerable Roger was also at one point talking about, he was asked to come and talk to people about, the beginnings of FPMT. I don't think that, a little bit that happened. He was describing the conditions at Copan. When there was a tent, there was no coffee shop, when they slept in the tent and teachings in the tent, and they had to go down the hill for running water, etc., etc. But also he said that he was then at that point, he was like attendant to Lama Yeshe. And Lama Yeshe would send him after a teaching to Lama Zopa's room to get the offerings before he gave them all away. And he said, I never got there on time. One time he got there and Geshe was coming out. And he went in and Lama Zopa was in his, we have under this robe, shantab, we have an underskirt to protect the colours from being directly against our skin. And so Rinpoche was in his underskirt because he'd given away his shantab because the Geshe needed it. And they were about to go and catch a plane. Fortunately, they were at Copan, so I think they were able to find another shantab. But no qualms, so nothing sticks, not grasping. I remember friends of mine giving Lama Zopa some malas to bless for a project they were fundraising for. They went back to pick them up and Rinpoche goes, oh, I'm sorry, I gave those away. So that's, that not having that grasping mind, grasping at mind, grasping mind, grasping at mind. So good to observe that arising, how the mind responds to those feelings, how habituation to craving, in our mind. And it makes it really difficult without realizing that we're engaging in one action after the other without realizing that mind of craving and grasping. So we can start to look at that in every, like it's happening every moment of the day. If we can see that more and more, then we can be free of that more and more, because as soon as you shine the light of awareness, because it spoils then, oh, I was really grasping at that and I really want that. Like I'm participating in some teachings at the moment, and the teacher's always talking about, grasping at a bag of chips and how long does the actual sensation last and blah, 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 blah. And so he's using that as an example of something that he's working on relinquishing. I thought, bag of chips will never be the same again. He keeps talking about it, bringing it to our awareness. A bag of crisps, crisp chips. Anyway, okay. So in terms of craving, again, referring to the first Dalai Lama, gives a strong warning about the dangers of the craving mind. It sweeps us into a torrent of existence so difficult to cross and spurred on by violent karmic winds. So we're not talking about the virtuous, peaceful ones, violent karmic winds. It churns with the great waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Save me from the terrifying river of desire. Or we could say equally, save me from this wheel of suffering of samsara, or these suffering existences. So the mind of craving. And so then the one of grasping. This is the monkey snatching fruit. Before we had the monkey being consciousness, linking past lives to current lives and karmic fruitions, linking those together. Here it is snatching at fruits, grasping at things. So this is a more enhanced increase in attachment, clinging to pleasant forms, sounds, odors, taste, touch, all the objects of the senses, as well as bad views. Dismissing this whole presentation, dismissing karma, law of cause and effect, for example, and systems of behavior associated with those views that reinforce the importance of everything of this life and so forth. So these are intellectually acquired views. So it's possible at any point in life to have attachment and grasping that serve to potentialize the karma from the past, but particularly near the end of this life, they're particularly influential in shaping our next life. So if we look at the different levels of grasping, so it's really, which is an intensification of the one of craving, which is an intensification of the one of feeling. So grasping at me and mind, particularly we're looking at it at the time of death. That's when it's crucial. You know, when we realize at the time of death, everything that I've relied on in this life to support me is no longer beneficial, no longer helpful. You know, when we do the 9-point death meditation, we look at family and friends and wealth, and even the body itself are no longer going to support us because we're leaving them behind at the time of death. So we're then left with all these feelings that we've struggled with for so long. So that if we're habituated always to grasping, clinging to pleasurable feelings and avoiding uncomfortable ones, that's what we're going to be grasping at the time of death. And if we do look at the death process, it's a pretty scary, you know, when we go through the death process dissolutions, there's some pretty scary manifestations to the mind that are certainly not pleasant. And I think it's really good to be around people, you know, in palliative care, to be around people and observe how people, you know, maybe how that process unfolds and how someone responds at those times. For example, the woman who I was, you know, first went to, was asked to visit when she had 3 days left to live and ended up living for 3 years. What karma was that, right? She was in a pretty good situation, but I can't say, you know, anyway. So at one point in that process, you know, I can't remember how long towards the end that was, she had pictures of the family, photos of the family, and she asked me to put those away, to remove them. So I put them away in the drawer. I thought, good, she's letting go of that attachment to family, not seeing the family. So then I went in subsequently and the photos were back there. The family had put them up again. They couldn't bear it. She was happy, but they weren't. So interesting, isn't it? So that was like a natural, at some level of letting go from her side. It was just like naturally part of the process. So I think it's fascinating if we get that sort of opportunity to observe what people do in those intense moments. And this was not someone who'd been, she wasn't Buddhist, she wasn't au fait with the death process. Her daughter, who was Buddhist long term, was the one who asked me to go and see her. She did ask me about the death time, and she also had, I mean, it was interesting, as a Polish Jew, she had a Catholic priest and a Buddhist nun visiting her. Interesting. Oh, we don't discriminate, right? None of us do. And so she'd ask me about the death process, and then she'd ask the priest about the death process. And of course, she wouldn't tell me what the other one said, but her daughter would say, well, she said, the priest came in the morning and said this, and you came in the afternoon and said that. I said, okay, well, she can take what she wants and leave the rest, you know. She didn't mind, you know. She had a very open mind, actually. So craving of existence, you know, is we're only left at that point with our own inner feelings, whatever they are. So, which then propels the next link, the one of existence. So here we have existence being represented as a pregnant woman. Now, this is not literally
birth or conception. It's like, it's the cause for that. Like the ripening, the fruit's going to ripen no matter what, but it's not the actual fruit or not the actual baby in the womb yet. So it's that fully activated karmic potency that it's not going to go backwards, you know, it's ready to give rise to a next lifetime. And it comes along at the moment of the end of this life. It's that consciousness that propels that. And this is why we spend so much time following the Buddha's presentation of, you know, contemplating the mind at the time of death and the importance of that consciousness in that last moment of gross consciousness of this life, which becomes the substantial cause for the next moment of consciousness in the next life. So this is the last experience of our life. It's called continued existence rather than the end of this life, because we have this mental continuum going on and on and on. So we continue on unless we've completely freed ourselves of samsara into another samsaric existence. And again, use the example now of my mother, who had a couple of near-death experiences before she actually died. She did say, I can't even die properly. She said that at some point when she was, you know, had wanted to die for some time because her life had become so shrunken into not the existence that she recognized, limited. And anyway, but she did used to say, you know, death's not the end, it's just another stage in the journey. And I think because she had those experiences, she had an experience of something, mind you, both times very, very pleasant. So it was something to look forward to, thankfully. So one hopes, I mean, I hope her mind was in that state. You know, we say they died peacefully. Well, someone can look peaceful. We don't know what's going on in their mind, actually. So what's going on in our mind? So that last moment of consciousness, which propels them. It's the actualizing karma, and it's the substantial continuity of that consciousness of the karmic imprint of in the second link. So that is connected, that then becomes the third link, that, you know, if the imprint on the consciousness that was dormant there and then has arisen, you know, that strong mental energy, which hasn't disappeared, it re-emerges into conscious awareness. So let's say, for example, we killed someone in this life, and the memory of that action and of the person's face floods into our consciousness at the time of death. So it's like we're reliving that experience, and that, you know, there might be strong anger or aggression, whatever mind that was, that powerful imprint that then propels that into our next existence, which is going to be an incredibly suffering existence, usually in the lower realms from having killed them, usually in the hell realms. So we can see how important it is to purify any of our past negative actions, you know, as much as we can in this life, to really familiarize with those states of mind that propel those, you know. This example reminds me of one of the gentlemen in the Liberation Prison Project. When I went to see him at Long Bay, he was in like a protection wing, not protection from other people, from himself, because he was suicidal. So protection from self-harm. Now, when we'd go and visit people who we'd talk about Dharma, we never asked them what they did. But he, like many others, felt impelled to tell us of his crime because it haunted him. You could see it haunting his every moment. Forget about death time, it was haunting every living moment. So he'd been drunk He'd been with his girlfriend. They had a fight. He killed his girlfriend. And then he said, and this is what I did to myself. And he lifted up his T-shirt and there's this giant deep slash that was healed, but from here down to here. That's what he did, seeing what he had done to his girlfriend, that he actually killed her in a drunken rage. You can see how this all manifests. And so it was very interesting. He was constantly haunted with that. So that's torture already in this life. That's hellish existence already in this life. And so fortunately, he connected with the Dharma and particularly profoundly connected with Lama Yeshe and so forth. So you could say, okay, we can work on this, we can work on this, we can work on this. And we might say, you know, we might not have created such heavy imprints in this life, but it could be that it's a ripening of a strong karmic imprint from a past life that manifests at death time. So it is certain that one karmic imprint will arise, like that arrow is going to connect, and others connect as supports for that, but that one particular one becomes the actualizing karma that directly leads to our next life. Okay. So again, for us here, it was a ripening of virtue, because here we are not only in a human form, but not only a rising of virtue in the context of having, you know, upheld vows, having good ethical conduct, having made stainless prayers, having practiced generosity and so forth. That is said to have created not just our human rebirth, but all the conditions, you know, we talk about the leisures and endowments of having perfect human rebirth, of having the wish to engage in Dharma, being here, having the opportunity, furthering our minds and so forth, continuing on the spiritual path. So that would have been strong imprint that ripened at the time, whatever past life we had. Right? In whichever past life, that is the ripening of this one. Because next time we'll look at how this plays out over a number of lifetimes. It's not like this is one life and then the next life and then the next life. So as at death time, the sensory experiences fade, the dissolutions happen, the dissolutions of the body. This strong final experience, that moment of consciousness, it's sort of like gets locked in. It's definitely going to project. It's the last conscious thought we have of this life. Okay. And then, you know, when we look at the dissolutions of the mental consciousnesses, the, you know, sort of 80 conceptual consciousnesses, that dissolves down into a more and more subtle level of consciousness. And so unless you've attained the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, in other words, you're free of all of this and you are actually able to manifest the three bodies of a Buddha, which is attaining the completion stage, that you are actually not just visualizing. Those who do tantric practices, you're not just visualizing that as we do on the generation stage, but that you actually have attained that. Then you're free of this. And then there, those that can do that really look forward to that death time, the rest of us not, because you've got that opportunity to practice with this very subtle level of mind. So we call that Thubten, or the mind of clear light, or so forth. And we see that being documented these days by His Holiness is really, you know, trying to get it documented. It's very hard to document because they can't always get a camera there and film it, you know, while someone's in that process. But we have enough evidence of that happening. I think, you know, for example, Geshe Lama Konchog, Amzapa Rinpoche said after Geshe Lama Konchog had sort of left the body behind, he said, oh, that's what he was telling me, that he had completed I think, the path. So, okay. Right. So meanwhile, back in samsara for the rest of us, that existence then propels birth, which is, in the Buddhist presentation, is not the physical birth, as we know. It's that moment of conception where the sperm and the ovum come together with this consciousness, propelling that from our side, nothing to do with mum and dad. So it's a continuation of that mind that became dormant at the 3rd link and manifested again at the 10th link and comes into that womb at conception. So our mind, our body, even our environment are already, coming together in that imprint on the basis of our past karmic actions. So that is shown as the woman actually giving birth. And as Arya Asanga said, what is the truth of suffering? Know it as being beings who are born and the world into which they are born. So all of our environment, all of our experiences are a result of our karmic potentialities ripening in this life. Okay, just look. We'll leave it there for today. So next time we'll finish off on that, and then we'll look at the how this is presented in different groupings and how it's presented over different lifetimes, and indeed purifying all of this. So we'll put that all in next time. Okay. So we can dedicate page 15, I think. 16, 17, somewhere around there. Kewadi no hudu talama sangi drukyone roha chikyang mahalupa de sala no pashu janchu sencho grimpo she ma ke panam ge guchi ke panyam pa me payam gu ne gondu pewashu. And then the prayers for the long life for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Osel, page 19. Jikten kamdi pende malupam gangle shungwe sampel yishino kadrin sumi tenzin yatsola soa depsu tushelu. Page 22. So shang chin jam gun yao wei ten sin gam pel we kon so go se chuk sum ko wei le mon tu du pa da su du she go nu sha tin shuk. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme,
Oh, Lama, please, please live long. Okay, thank you. We have Medicine Buddha Puja tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. And what else?